I need to start with something small, because the small thing is the part people believe. Every year, on the same night in September, my answering machine records a message I never left. Not a call coming in, an outgoing greeting, the one people hear when they miss me. I've replaced the machine twice. Different brand, different house. It doesn't matter. The message is my voice. Calm, a little flat, the way I used to sound near the end of a shift. It gives a radio call sign that hasn't existed in years. It says, everything is clear. And then, slow and careful, the way you'd read a name off a list you don't want to get wrong. It says my full name. I don't erase it. I stopped trying. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand I'm not a dramatic man. I worked 12 years as a ranger at a mountain park, and most of that job made sense. This part didn't. So I'll do what I always did with the things that didn't fit. I'll start at the beginning, with the night frequency, and I'll tell it the way it happened. My name is Wes Marlow. 12 years at Halloran Divide, a high park up in the northern Rockies. The last 7 of those years, I worked the graveyard shift on purpose. Most rangers avoid nights. I asked for them. The job itself was ordinary, and I want to be honest about that before I'm anything else. Gate checks, campground loops, bear locker inspections, storm closures when the weather turned. I wrote incident reports for twisted ankles and lost car keys, and the occasional camper who missed a pickup and turned up fine 2 days later. Ordinary problems with ordinary answers. I liked that. I'm not a believer. I've never been to a seance, never chased a light in the woods, never once thought a place could want something. I was a documentation man. If it happened, I wrote it down. If I couldn't explain it, I wrote that too. And I let the paperwork carry the weight so I didn't have to. I mention all of this because I still can't set one thing down. And because, to this day, when my phone rings at home, I don't say hello. I answer with a call sign. I don't decide to. My mouth just does it. Halloran Divide had one repeater. One. It sat in the valley and did its best. And its best wasn't much once you got behind the ridges. There were long dead zones up there, stretches where you could key your radio all night and nothing would leave the mountain. During the day, the frequency was a mess. Static, bleed from other agencies, half a word from a highway crew 40 miles off. Normal for a single repeater, carrying more country than it was built for. You learned to talk through it. At night, it was different. After a certain hour, the channel went clean. No static, no bleed, just an open, patient quiet. Like the whole band was holding still. I told myself it was the cold air settling. Fewer transmissions competing. That's a real thing. It half explained it. We ran on call signs. Every ranger had one. I was Halloran 6. The dispatcher was Halloran Base. A call sign isn't a person. It's a role. When I left, someone else became Halloran 6, and my number went back on the shelf. I didn't think much about that distinction for years. It turned out to be the whole story. There was a laminated card taped to the desk at the station. Radio protocol. 5 typed rules. Keep transmissions short. Use call signs. Confirm your channel. Standard stuff you stopped reading after the first week. Then, at the bottom, a 6th line. Handwritten. Different ink. Black where the printing was blue. in a small, careful hand nobody would claim. It said, "Names stay off the air after dark." The sensible reading came to me right away. Call signs cut confusion on an open band. Anyone with a scanner can hear you, so you don't broadcast personal information. That's just radio hygiene. Good practice, honestly. Except the line said after dark. Names during the day were apparently fine. And no supervisor I ever asked would admit to writing it. Not one. They'd glance at it, say something about privacy, and change the subject in a way I noticed, but couldn't name at first. I worked under that card for years. I followed the sixth line the way you follow a habit, without weighing it. It was handed to me in person on my first night by the one man who never explained anything twice. And that's really where this starts. You'd have liked the park in daylight. Most people did. Halloran Divide sat high, with 3 alpine lakes that turned that hard glacier blue in July. There were 3 campground loops, a summit trail that filled every weekend, and a visitor center where families asked about bears and moose and whether the water was safe to drink. We ran permit checks at the trailheads. We reminded people to hang their food and use the bear lockers. We patched up scraped knees and pointed lost hikers back toward their cars. It was good work. Honest work. I mean that. There's a particular satisfaction in keeping a place like that running, in being the person who knows where the water crossings get bad and which campsite floods first. I loved it in daylight, the way you love something you understand completely. I'm telling you how ordinary it was on purpose. Everything I'm going to describe happened inside this same park. Same lakes, same loops, same friendly summit trail with the wooden sign. Nothing about the geography changed. The only thing that changed was the hour. In daylight, it was one of the safest places I've ever worked. That's what made the other part so hard to hold. The night shift was a different job, wearing the same uniform. You'd lock the gates at dusk, run the loops slow with your headlights, sweeping empty campsites. Check that the bear lockers were latched, that no one had a fire going they shouldn't. And every 30 minutes, on the half hour, you called in. Call sign, location, status. Halloran 6, Loop C, all clear. Base acknowledged. Simple. The cadence was the spine of the whole shift. You could set your watch by it, and I did. Most nights, that was all it was. Long stretches of dark road, the smell of pine and cold, the particular quiet of being the only person awake on a mountain. I preferred it to days. No crowds, no questions, just the work and the rhythm of the check-ins. There's an order to it that suited me. I got good at reading that order. I knew what the loops sounded like at 2 a.m. I knew how the creek carried across the lower campground when the wind sat still. I knew the exact interval between my check-ins so well that I'd start reaching for the mic a few seconds before the half hour without looking at the clock. Which is why, when the rhythm broke, I noticed. It was a small deviation. That's how it always starts. Small. I should explain the radio properly, because it matters later, and because I don't want you thinking I'm the kind of man who jumps at signal noise. We had the one repeater in the valley. Every transmission on the frequency bounced through it. If your signal reached the repeater, everyone on channel heard you, and the automated recorder logged it. if your signal didn't reach the repeater, you were talking to yourself. Behind the ridges, you couldn't reach it. Those were the dead zones. There was a signed engineering report in the station binder that mapped them out, elevation by elevation, ridge by ridge. Certified. A survey crew had come up, tested every stretch, and marked the areas where no signal passed in or out. The upper switchbacks, the far side of the North Ridge, a pocket behind the old fire road. I'd read the report more than once, the way you read the manual for a thing you rely on. It was dry. It was thorough. It said, in plain engineering language, the transmissions from those areas were physically impossible. I want you to hold on to that word. Impossible. Not unlikely. Not weak. Impossible. On paper. Signed. Filed. Because later, the transmissions that scared me most came from exactly those places. And the paper never changed its mind. The paper still says it couldn't happen. I've thought about driving up to get a copy, just to look at it again. I don't know what I'd be checking for. Here's the part every night Ranger noticed, and none of us talked about. For about 40 minutes after 2 in the morning, the frequency went completely clean. From roughly 2 o'clock to 2:40, the static dropped out. The bleed from other channels stopped, and the band sat there open and still, clearer than it ever got in daylight. You'd key up for a check-in, and your own voice would come back so crisp it sounded close, like the mountain had shrunk around you. The explanation was atmospheric. Temperature inversions are real up high. Cold air settles in the valley. The layers stack. And radio behaves strangely at the edges of it. Fewer transmissions at that hour. Less interference. It half worked as an answer. And for a long time, I let it. But weather doesn't keep a schedule. Inversions drift. They build slow and break slow. And they don't care what time it is. This window didn't drift. It opened near 2 and closed near 2:40, night after night, sharp on both ends, like something switching on and switching off. Too consistent to be air. The veterans all knew it was there. They'd finish their late check-ins before 2 if they could. And if they couldn't, they kept it short. Nobody said why. The man who taught me to respect that window was the same man who gave me the rule about names. So let me tell you about him. Hollis Reyes ran dispatch on nights. He'd been on the mountain more than 20 years by the time I showed up. And he trained me the way a good craftsman trains anyone. By doing it right in front of you and expecting you to notice. He was easy to be around. Dry sense of humor. Slow to rattle. The kind of steady that comes from a man who's already seen the worst version of most situations and found it survivable. He taught me spacing on the loops, timing on the check-ins, how to talk on the radio so you said everything in 6 words and wasted nothing. I liked him immediately, and I trusted him faster than I trust most people. But I noticed something early. The way you notice a person never takes off their watch. In 20 years of talking on that radio, Hollis never once said anyone's name over the air. Not a first name, not a last name, not a nickname, not even as a joke. If a new hire slipped and used a name, Hollis would answer with the call sign, gently, like he was correcting your grip on a tool. Never sharp, never a lecture, just a quiet, consistent steering, over and over, for 20 years. You don't keep a habit that clean by accident. I know that now. Back then, I just thought he was old school about protocol. I was wrong about what kind of protocol it was. My first night, near dawn, we were closing out the shift. The sky was going gray behind the peaks, and the coffee had gone cold. And Hollis leaned back in the dispatch chair and looked at me the way you look at somebody you've decided to keep. He said, "One thing. Up here, you're a number, not a name. Keep it that way till sunrise." I took it as radio etiquette wisdom. Call signs on the air. Keep it professional. Don't hand your identity to every scanner in 3 counties. I nodded and said something like, "Sure, understood." I filed it under good advice from a good man. He didn't elaborate. That was the thing about Hollis. He wouldn't dress up a warning to make you comfortable. He just watched me for a second longer than felt normal, making sure it had actually landed. And then he went back to his paperwork. The subject was closed. I repeated that line for years. To seasonal hires, to new night rangers, the way you pass down a saying without thinking about where it came from. You're a number, not a name. It sounded like wisdom because it was short, and it rhymed with common sense. It wasn't advice. I understand that now. It was a boundary. And the reason it specified till sunrise, the reason the hour mattered, that took me a lot longer to learn than I'd like to admit. The first real rule was about the check-ins, and it came with a story I only half heard the first time. The rule was this: during your scheduled check-in, if dispatch acknowledges you before you finish keying up, you complete your call sign anyway, exactly as normal. And you add nothing personal. You don't say thanks, you don't say your name, you don't chat. You finish your 6 words, and you move on. The official explanation was clean and technical, and Hollis gave it to me straight. On a single repeater system, you get latency, you get overlapping transmissions. Sometimes the timing stacks in a way that makes an acknowledgement sound like it landed a hair early, like bass answered before you were done. It's an artifact of the equipment. Real thing. Happens on bad repeaters everywhere. You just ride it out and keep protocol. I believed it completely. I still think the technical part is accurate as far as it goes. Latency is real. Overlap is real. On a system that old, carrying that much country, you'd expect exactly that kind of glitch. And for a long time, that's all I thought it was. But there was a piece of the rule that didn't fit the explanation. Latency explains the timing. It doesn't explain why you're told to add nothing personal. If the only issue is a transmission landing early, what does it matter what words you say? That part I didn't question at first. I do now. It happened maybe 2 months in. A routine 2 a.m. check-in, right at the edge of the clean window. I was parked at the top of Loop A, engine idling, reaching for the mic the way I always did a few seconds before the half hour. I had the mic in my hand. I hadn't pressed the key yet. I was still turning the numbers over in my head. Halloran 6, Loop A, all clear, when the speaker came alive on its own and bass acknowledged me. My call sign said correctly, in a flat, even voice, Halloran 6, copy, all clear. I hadn't transmitted. Latency can shave a fraction of a second off timing. It cannot answer a call that hasn't happened yet. There was nothing to be early to. My thumb was still off the key. I did what the rule said. I finished the check-in properly, out loud, and I said nothing else. No name, no question. Just the 6 words, calm as I could manage. And then I sat there. At the end of the shift, I mentioned it to Hollis, casual, expecting him to laugh it off as the repeater acting up. He didn't laugh. He looked at his log, and I watched him find something on the page, and I saw him cross a word out, hard, several strokes, until it was just a black mark. He said he never sent that acknowledgement, and I believed him, which was the problem. After that night, I paid closer attention, and I started noticing the second rule getting enforced around me before anyone said it out loud. At the start of every shift, the dispatcher wrote every active call sign on a whiteboard beside the radio. Who was on tonight? What numbers were live? Halloran 2, Halloran 6, whoever else. Simple roster. And the rule attached to it was this: if you hear a call sign on the frequency that is not on the board, you log the time and you do not respond. You don't answer it. You don't ask who it is. You write it down and you leave it alone. The official explanation made sense the way all of them did. On an open band, you can catch bleed from adjacent agencies. County crews, Forest Service, highway maintenance. Their signals sometimes crossed onto our channel. And the last thing you want is 2 agencies answering each other by mistake. So you keep a board. You know who's real. And you ignore the rest. Mutual aid, hygiene, clean. But sit with what the board actually was. It existed for one purpose, so that you could tell, at a glance, which voices belonged and which didn't. You don't build a ritual around sorting the real from the unreal unless, at some point, something unreal came across the wire and someone answered it. The board was an answer to a question. I hadn't heard the question yet. I heard it about a week later. 2 a.m. inside the clean window. The band gone glass still. I was running Loop C when a check-in came across the speaker. Halloran 9, all clear. Perfect protocol. Correct cadence, 6 words. The little downturn at the end, the way we all said it. There was no Halloran 9 that season. I'd written the board myself that night. 2, 4, 6. That was it. 9 wasn't live. 9 wasn't on the mountain. I did what the rule said. I logged the time, and I didn't respond. But it sat with me. So the next day, I went digging through old rosters. And I found it. Halloran 9 had been a real call sign. It belonged to a ranger who'd retired 8 years earlier and moved out of state to Arizona, I think. Gone almost a decade. The number had been shelved and never reassigned. And the voice on that check-in used the cadence exactly. Not just the words, the rhythm. The little habits a person builds into 6 words they say 1,000 times. I told myself it was an adjacent channel, some county crew that happened to run similar numbering, a coincidence of protocol. I said that to myself twice. I didn't believe it either time. A retired man's dead call sign doesn't check in at 2 a.m. with his own cadence intact. I decided to stop trusting my ears. Ears get tired. Ears fill in gaps. Ears do things at 2 a.m. that they don't do at noon. I wanted something that couldn't be tired. We had one. The dispatch recorder was hardwired into the system. Every transmission that reached the repeater got logged automatically. No human involved. No button to press. timestamp, duration, and the originating call sign written to an archive the second a signal came through. It didn't interpret. It didn't get spooked. If a transmission happened, it recorded it. That was the whole point of the thing. So on my next day off, I sat at the station and pulled a month of overnight archives. I expected to find nothing, honestly. I expected to prove to myself that my ears had been playing games. And then I could go back to sleeping. The month wasn't empty. Scattered through the overnight logs, time-stamped and archived, were transmissions from call signs that weren't on any board. Halloran 9 turned up more than once. There were others, numbers I didn't recognize at all, numbers that had never been assigned while I worked there, and every single one of them fell in the same window, between 2 o'clock and 2:40 in the morning. Not one outside it. I sat with that log open for a long time. The machine had recorded what I'd heard. I wasn't tired. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't filling in gaps. Something was transmitting on that frequency on a schedule. That was the part I couldn't get around. A malfunction doesn't keep a schedule. A malfunction doesn't wait for 2 a.m. every single night, and then stop at 2:40, like a shift ending. Whatever this was, it kept time better than I did. I scrolled back through weeks of it. Same window, over and over. And then I found the one entry that wasn't a check-in at all. Most of the off-board entries were routine. Call sign, all clear, the same 6-word shape as everyone else. That was almost the worst part. How normal they looked in the log, lined up with the real ones like they belonged. But one entry was different, and I noticed it because the duration was wrong. Longer than a check-in. I pulled the audio. A voice, flat and even. The same tone as every acknowledgement that had ever spooked me, said, "Halloran 6, say again your name." Not call sign, name. And Halloran 6 was me. I sat there and played it 3 times to be sure I'd heard it right. There is no protocol anywhere, not on our channel, not on any channel I've ever worked, that asks for a name over the air. It's the one thing you never do. And yet, it was polite about it. Procedural, almost. The exact tone a colleague uses when the reception's bad, and they just need you to repeat yourself. Say again your name. As if I'd already started giving it, and they'd missed the end. I hadn't. I'd never said my name on that radio, not once, because of a handwritten line on a laminated card. I'd never given it anything to say back. I played the audio for Hollis. He listened all the way through without moving. Then he took the headphones off and set them down carefully. And for a moment, he didn't say anything at all. When he did, it was quiet. He said, "You did right not to say it." That was the first time on that mountain I felt genuinely cold, sitting in a warm station in the middle of the day, listening to a machine ask me for the one thing I'd been trained never to give. Hollis's answer didn't answer anything. "You did right not to say." It told me there was a wrong. And it told me he knew what the wrong was. And it told me he wasn't going to say. So I started looking on my own. And the third rule was waiting for me the way the first 2 had been, once I knew to see it. The rule was this: if another ranger contacts you at night and asks you to meet them, to assist, to come to a location, You confirm their call sign and unit number against the board before you respond and before you move. You never proceed on a voice alone. A familiar voice is not enough. You verify the number first, every time. The official explanation was about impersonation on an open band. Anybody with a scanner and some nerve could key up, pretend to be a ranger, and try to send you somewhere. The verification step protected against misdirected responses, against being lured off your beat by a stranger. Sensible security. On paper, it's just good practice for any agency running open comms. But look at what the rule quietly admits. It assumes that someone, or something, might imitate a ranger's voice well enough to move you into the dark. Not a garbled fake. Good enough. Good enough that the only defense was a number written on a board back at the station. You don't write that rule for a hypothetical. You write it because a voice once fooled somebody. I wanted to know who, so I pulled the personnel files, the ones I had access to, and I found the man who'd held Halloran 6 before me. His name was Cody Pruett, Night Ranger, same beat, same call sign, and he'd left 3 years before I started. The file listed him as a routine interstate transfer, reassigned out of state. Everything in order. Signed, dated, filed, closed. I was curious. That's all it was at first. Professional curiosity about the man whose number I carried. So I tried to reach him. I called the station he was supposedly transferred to. They had no record of him. Never received him. No forwarding posting existed under his name anywhere I could find. Not in the region, not in the system I could access. I widened the search and got nothing. Cody Pruett had been processed out of one park and had never arrived anywhere else. The paperwork was flawless. That's what I keep coming back to. The transfer was complete, properly signed, correctly filed, a clean, bureaucratic exit for a man who then simply did not exist at the other end of it. A person doesn't do that. A person shows up somewhere. They cash a check. They file an address. They leave a track. He didn't leave a track. The system said he'd gone somewhere, and the somewhere wasn't real. That's a strange thing to hold in your hands. A perfect record of a man walking through a door that opens onto nothing. I wanted his last night. If there was anything real left of Cody Pruett, it would be in the dispatch archive. Because the recorder didn't lie, and the recorder didn't transfer anybody anywhere. I found the date of his transfer paperwork and pulled the overnight archive from the shift before it. The logs were normal for most of the night. Check-ins from Halloran 6, his voice, on schedule, all clear, the ordinary rhythm of a man doing his job. I scrolled toward the end. His final transmission was logged at 2:13 in the morning, inside the window. I pulled the audio. It was Halloran 6, his voice, and he was breaking protocol, saying a name over the air, which he never should have done, which none of us should ever do. He said, "This is Ranger Cody Pruett." And then nothing. Not the end of a sentence, the end of a name. The recording stopped mid-word on the second syllable of his own last name. The duration log confirmed it. The transmission didn't fade, didn't cut to static, didn't trail off. It simply ended cleanly, right there in the middle of him saying who he was. I checked the board entries for that night. 4 minutes earlier, at 2:09, an off-board call sign had been logged. Halloran 9, the same retired, shelved, decade-dead number that had checked in on my own loop. It had been there, on the frequency, 4 minutes before Cody Pruett said his name and stopped existing on the tape. I sat with that for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough that the station got dark around me, and I didn't turn on a light. The thing that finally moved me from unsettled to certain was the paperwork, because paperwork is my language, and the paperwork told a story nobody meant to leave behind. I went back through the procedure records for the weeks right after Pruett's transfer, and I found a cluster of changes. Within a month of him vanishing, night protocol had been quietly rewritten. Call sign only communication became mandatory, formally, in writing. The dispatch board, the roster of live call signs, was introduced as required equipment. And somewhere in that same stretch, on the laminated card at the desk, the handwritten 6th line appeared. Names stay off the air after dark. No memo announced any of it. No meeting, no bulletin, no author on the changes. They simply arrived, all together, right after a man said his name on the radio, and never got to finish it. A whole set of new rules with no explanation, spawned in the empty space where Cody Pruett used to be. I took it to Hollis. I laid it out, all of it. The log, the transfer to nowhere, the changes with no author. And for once, he didn't steer me back to a call sign. He was quiet, and then he told me the truth, or as much of it as he'd say. He said the office knew something was wrong with the night frequency. They'd known for years, and they'd made a decision, higher than him, about what to do about it. Not investigate, not explain, just discipline, just rules. He said, we don't fix it, we just don't feed it. Then he wouldn't say any more, and I understood that the silence itself was policy. For a while, the rules felt like enough. I was careful. I was disciplined. I followed every one of them, and nothing came for me. And I let myself believe that discipline was working, that the rules were a wall, and I was safe behind it. I want to be honest about that comfort, because it's the thing that keeps people on the mountain too long. There was a 5th rule, and it was the one that finally showed me what the wall was actually holding back. The rule was this: between 2 o'clock and 2:40 in the morning, inside the clean window, you do not verbally confirm any statement about your own location, your condition, or your identity. If a voice says you're somewhere, you don't say yes. If a voice asks if you're all right, you don't say you are. You acknowledge with your call sign only. 6 words, nothing more, no matter what's said to you. The official reason was fatigue. That's the low alertness hour. The reason reduces chatter and error when you're least sharp. Plausible. Everything they told us was always plausible. But I understood the real shape of it by then. Confirmation was the mechanism, saying, yes, that's me, I'm here, I'm fine. That was the door. The rule didn't reduce error. It kept a door shut. Because on this mountain, agreeing that you were you was not a small thing. It was consent. I just hadn't been asked yet. It asked me on a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because I'd swapped shifts, and I wasn't supposed to be on. 2:11 in the morning. The band went glass clean, that sharp, switched-on stillness, and a voice came across the speaker, warm and easy. the exact tone a colleague uses when they've spotted your truck and they're glad it's you. It said, "Evening, Wes. Not Halloran 6. My name." My first name, in a voice that knew how to say it, comfortable with it, the way a friend says it across a parking lot. Every instinct I had wanted to answer the way you answer a friend. It's the most natural thing in the world, hearing your own name and giving something back. My thumb was on the key before I'd decided anything. I keyed up, and I said, "Halloran 6. 6 words became 2. Nothing else. It was the hardest piece of radio discipline of my life, holding my own name in my mouth and refusing to let it out, refusing to confirm that the man it was greeting was here to be greeted. The voice waited. The clean window hummed. And then, gentle, almost kind, it said, "You can say it. Everyone does, eventually." I didn't. I sat in the dark with the mic in my hand, and I did not say my name. I told myself, driving home that morning, that someone had gotten onto the frequency. A hoax. Somebody with a scanner, and my name off a duty roster, having a cruel laugh at the night ranger. That explanation held for exactly 1 day, until the physical world stopped cooperating with it. The next afternoon, I checked 2 things. The trail camera at the maintenance gate, which logged every vehicle that passed up the fire road, and the GPS unit on my patrol truck, which tracked my position all night, whether I liked it or not. The dispatch log showed Halloran 6 checking in from the upper switchbacks at 2:14 that morning. But at 2:14, I'd been parked at the station. My truck's GPS confirmed it, plainly, time-stamped. The vehicle hadn't moved. It sat at the station from 2 until I left. There was no version of the night where I was on the upper switchbacks, and yet the gate camera had a photo. 2:13 a.m. A ranger truck, headlights on, moving uphill through the gate toward the switchbacks. Our make, our markings. The plate was there in the frame, but wouldn't resolve, blurred in a way the camera never blurred anything else. And behind the wheel, a shape, a person, sitting the way you sit when you're driving somewhere you know. 2 of me, one parked at the station with the GPS to prove it, one recorded on the mountain, checking in with my call sign from a place my truck never went, driving my beat in a truck that wasn't mine. I brought the footage to Hollis. I had it all lined up, the photo, the GPS, the dispatch log, the timestamps stacked against each other. I needed him to look at it and tell me it was equipment error, a synced clock gone wrong, anything. He watched it once, just once. He didn't ask to see it again, didn't lean in, didn't reach for the log to check my timestamps against his. He watched the truck come through the gate and the shape behind the wheel. And then he sat back and got very still, the way he got still the day he crossed the word out of his book. That same week, he started his retirement paperwork. 20-some years, and he filed to leave inside a week. And he didn't make a show of it. He just began the process, quietly, the way he did everything. Before he left, he told me the last real thing anyone ever told me about that place. He said, "Once it has a shape that looks like you, and a call sign that answers for you, the only thing keeping you the real one is that you have never confirmed your name out loud. That's the whole of it. That's the line you don't cross." He looked at me the way he had my first night, making sure it landed. And he said, don't ever finish it. Then Hollis was gone, and I was the only one left on the mountain who knew. I want to stop here and say something plainly, because I know how all of this sounds, and I've never liked how it sounds. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't watch the shows. I've never gone looking for a light in the trees, or told a story around a fire to get a reaction. When people at the visitor center asked if the park was haunted, I'd smile and tell them the only thing dangerous in these woods was their own carelessness. And I meant it, because for years it was true. I spent this whole time looking for the boring answer. That's not me being modest. That's my actual method. Signal bounce, equipment fault, a hoaxer, fatigue, bad memory. I reached for every ordinary explanation first, every single time, because ordinary explanations are almost always right, and a man who jumps past them isn't doing the job. I'm telling you this now because the boring answers ran out. Not all at once, one at a time, each one killed by one specific thing that wouldn't fit it. And I only kept the pieces that survived a second look, the ones I checked twice, cold and rested, and in daylight. So don't believe me, because I sound scared. I don't. Believe the evidence, or don't. I'm just telling you what was in the logs. Let me walk you through the answers I tried, because I owe you that, and because I want you to watch them fail the way I did. First I said, it was adjacent agency bleed. County crews, Forest Service, their signals crossing onto our channel at odd hours. That's the standard explanation for a strange voice on an open band, and it's usually right. It died when I checked the numbering. No agency near us used Halloran call signs. Nobody else was Halloran 9. That number existed only on our mountain, and only in our archive. Then I said hoaxers. Somebody with a scanner and a grudge, keying up to spook the night ranger. That one held longer, because people are capable of a lot. It died on the recorder. A hoaxer transmits into the repeater, like anyone else, from a place a signal can reach. The off-board transmissions logged from the certified dead zones, from behind the ridges where no signal passes in or out. A man with a scanner cannot transmit from a place that physically cannot transmit. Then disgruntled ex-staff. Then equipment faults, a glitch in the recorder itself. Then fatigue, my own tired ears at 2 a.m. Then simple pattern matching, the brain hearing a voice in noise. I gave each one its due. Each one died on a single fact. The recorder doesn't get tired. The dead zones don't broadcast. And no glitch answers a question I just asked. One by one, every exit closed. That's what I mean when I say the boring answers ran out. I didn't abandon them. They abandoned me. You're probably wondering why I didn't just leave. I've wondered it myself, and I've had years to sit with the answer. And it isn't flattering. Part of it was pride. I was good at that job. I knew the mountain better than anyone left, and walking away would have meant admitting there was something up there I couldn't handle, something I couldn't write into a report and close. I don't quit things. I finish shifts. It's most of who I am. Part of it was routine. The check-ins, the loops, the rhythm of the work. There's a comfort in a thing you've done 10,000 times, and comfort is a strong drug at 3 a.m. on a lonely mountain. But mostly, it was the rules. That's the part I want you to understand, because it's the trap. The rules gave me a false comfort. Follow them and you're fine. Keep your name off the air, verify the number, don't confirm, and the wall holds. I believed the wall held. I believed that as long as I was careful, careful was enough. And being careful let me stay, night after night, telling myself the discipline was protection. It wasn't protection. It was a way of living next to the thing without touching it. The rules didn't make me safe. They just kept me from being taken while I stayed somewhere I never should have stayed. And I only understood that the night the comfort cracked, the night the wall stopped being a wall and became a door, and I was standing right in front of it. There was one more rule. Hollis gave it to me privately, not off a card, not from any binder. He gave it to me the way you hand someone something you hope they never have to use. The rule was this: if you ever hear your own call sign answered in your own voice on the night band, you do not key up. You do not correct it. You do not say, "That isn't me." You sit still, and you stay silent, and you let it stand. It runs against everything in you. If you heard yourself, your voice, checking in when you hadn't, your first instinct would be to grab the mic and say, "Wait, that's not me. I'm here. The real one is here." That's the natural thing. That's what a person does. And that, Hollis told me, is the fatal move, because correcting it is a form of confirming which one is real. The moment you key up and insist that isn't me, the band records the correction, and it records it as the true you speaking. It marks that voice, your live voice, keying up in the dead of the window, as the one leaving. Saying that isn't me is just another way of saying my name, of putting yourself on the air to be claimed. Silence was the only safety, not answering, letting the false one stand and refusing to argue. I understood it, the way you understand a warning you never expect to need. I had never had to use it. And then I did. It was my last shift, though I didn't know that yet. I was sitting in the station, the dispatch chair, the overnight system running itself the way it did when there was no one at base. 2:11 in the morning. The band went glass clean, that switched-on stillness, and I felt it the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm. The recorder logged a transmission. Halloran 6, my call sign. And the voice that came out of the speaker was mine. Not close to mine. Mine. My flat, tired, end-of-shift voice, calm and even, saying the words I'd said 10,000 times. Halloran 6, all clear. This is Ranger Wes Marlow. My full name, complete, finished, every syllable, in my own voice, out on the air, while I sat in the dark with my hands in my lap and the mic untouched on its hook. It said the name I had spent 7 years never saying. It said it easily, like it had always known how. Everything in me came up at once. Key up. Say it. That isn't me. I'm here. I'm the real one. That isn't me. My hand actually moved toward the hook. And then Hollis's voice was in my head. Quiet. The way he said, everything. Don't ever finish it. And I understood that keying up to deny it was just finishing it in a different order. I put my hand back down. I sat still. I said nothing. I let my own name stand on the air without me. And I did not argue. And it was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I finished the shift in silence, I ran no more check-ins. I sat in that chair until the sky went gray behind the peaks, and the clean window had long since closed. And then I drove out at first light with the windows down and the radio off. I filed an incident report that morning. It said nothing. Routine overnight, nothing unusual to note. All loops clear. A boring, clean, useless report. Exactly the kind I'd spent a career refusing to write. And I wrote it without a flicker of guilt, because the alternative was a report no one would believe, and everyone above me had already decided not to read. That's the contrast I keep coming back to. The official record of my last night says the shift was quiet. What I remember is my own voice finishing my own name on a frequency I never keyed. The paper and the memory don't match, and only one of them is true, and it isn't the paper. I resigned within the week. Personal reasons. My supervisor asked if there was anything the park could do, a schedule change, some time off, and I told him no, and thanked him for 12 good years, and most of them were good. So I meant it. I kept my silence, and I kept my name. I walked off that mountain, still the only one wearing it, and for a long time I told myself that was the end of it, that staying quiet had been enough, that I'd held the line and won. I never learned what the frequency was. I want to be clear about that, because people always want me to have an answer, and I don't. I don't know if it was a place, a thing, a habit the mountain had gotten into over years I'll never see the start of. I never found out. I never found Cody Pruett either, and I never heard from Hollis again, though I've tried. His number's disconnected. Nobody at the park knows where he went. I try not to think too hard about that. The rules worked. I believe that. I kept my name off the air. I didn't confirm. I didn't correct. And I walked away breathing, which is more than the man before me managed. I believe the rules worked. Mostly. I hold on to mostly the way you hold a railing on a dark stair. Here's the habit I kept. When my phone rings at home, I don't say hello. I answer with a call sign. My mouth just does it before I decide anything, especially after dark. It isn't superstition. It's the one discipline that kept me real, and I never learned how to put it down. And every year, on the same night in September, my answering machine records a message I never left. My voice, a call sign that hasn't existed in years. Everything's clear. And then, slow and careful, the way you read a name off a list, it says, Wes Marlow. I don't erase it. I stop answering the phone that week, and I wait for the night to pass. And I try not to wonder whether the thing on the band ever got me, or whether it's still up there, patient, waiting for the one confirmation I never gave, or whether somewhere on that mountain, a version of me has been running the night beat for years now, checking in on schedule, all clear, using the name I finally learned to say